Hello, in this video I'll show you more tips and tricks inside 3ds Max here. So let's learn about how we can do various types of details here. So I'll just use a plane for this. And I'll just center this here, G to turn off the grid, and I'll just give this a gray object color here. So one thing I was talking about in the previous video about how you can avoid distortion is that let's say that I select all these loops and then remove them, holding down Control, so get rid of the vertices as well. So let's say I want there to be a cut right here, an angle, and I can delete this right here. So I've got this right here, but if I now insert loops here, let's say I select this and just use connect, notice how all of the edges here are following the topology right here. So if I then, let's say, select these polygons, notice how they're all kind of deformed right here. So if I want them to be straight, I'll have to select all of them here and use planar on the y-axis here and kind of straighten them all out. So two things I can do here, I'll just delete out of poly to quickly undo all that, is that I can have the loops inserted first. So I can insert the loops that I want first here, and then kind of model out the detail that I want. Let's select that and then delete. And then I can cut where I want the angle to be here. And that way I can avoid that from happening. And what I can also do, as we saw previously with the default topology right here, is that I can just insert a loop here and then, for example, make the cut that I want. And since I've separated this kind of area with this topology right here, with this loop right here, it means I can now just insert segments here without having any distortion, because I've kind of separated the detail right here. Alright. So one thing we can use right here is mesh smooth and tessellate. So instead of having to, let's say, apply a turbo smooth or open subdiv, we can actually do that in the edit poly modifier right here. So one interesting way of creating details is not even beveling here, but just moving polygons up. So what I can do is use mesh smooth or tessellate. So in this case, whether I use mesh smooth or tessellate, notice I get the same result here because nothing is curved here. But mesh smooth actually smooths things out, whereas tessellate just inserts loops like so. And mesh smooth also pays attention to the edge creasing. So I can just use mesh smooth. I've got that set to hotkey 6. There we go. And now what I can do to get interesting detail is just to select some polygons here. And perhaps I can select all this and just kind of scale it here. If I want the result to be a little bit elongated, I can just move this up like so. And if I apply, let's say, open subdiv, notice I get this kind of interesting detail right here. As a contrast, I'll just make this all planar on the z-axis. I've got that set to Shift Z. What I can also do instead of just moving it up is I can bevel it up. But I would get a slightly different result right here. You can see the difference between just moving it up and beveling it up. When you just move it up, you get a smoother result here, which you may want sometimes. So after moving this up, we can either, with these polygons selected, hold Shift and click here to convert to the border edges and give this a crease value. Let's say 0.15. And now we've got this kind of result right here. Or we can do is an inset right here, which would give us a similar result. Once we've got this here, I can, let's say, crease this. And remember, if I just crease all of this here, let's say 0.25, I'll get kind of a boring result right here. So we can spice it up by removing some of those edges here. So for example, I will deselect these edges. And now if I give this 0.25, we get a slightly more interesting result right here. We can also get other results just by moving edges here. Just by moving like this or using set flow. I can hold down Shift, click, click, set flow here as well. And so now I've got this kind of result right here. So just a lot of things you can do just by very basic movement operations here. Now if I want to add further detail here, this is too simple here, so what I can do is open subdiv, let's say one iteration, add a poly, and now I have more topology here to add details here. So what I can do, for example, is to select this, bevel this with 0, planar on the z-axis, snaps, and snap this right here, and then quickly select this, and then weld. I've got that set to hotkey Control W. You can weld either by clicking on this or by clicking on the settings. The settings give you an additional option to use the threshold. So if I set to be, for example, 0.01 and click on OK, if I press Control W, it's going to weld with those settings. Unless, of course, I apply a poly, in which case the settings would be reset back to 0.1. So 3ds Max, remember the last settings you used here for various operations here. So for example, if I ring and connect and have this be, let's say, 3 segments, increase the pinch value. If I then redo this right here, it's using the same settings. But if I apply new output modifier, it's reset. So this is another example of a little detail you can add here just by getting this right here. So if I want to create a detail inside of here, I have 2 options. The first thing I can do is inset and then bevel. And the second thing I can do is subdivide further. So for example, here what I would do is just use crease set real quick just so I can maintain this, because I want to maintain a sharpness right here. So I will use crease set for that. Maybe right here. And then create set. And then open subdiv and then add a poly on top. And so what else I'd like to do is just to clear the smoothing group so I can see the topology better here. So now what I've done here is I've subdivided this. So now instead of having to inset, what I can do is just use this topology right here, these polygons. And the benefit to doing it this way is that you avoid these kinds of loops around here. As you can see here, I have a loop going around here, which can cause some problems with subdivision. Whereas this does not have that. This just has this kind of topology right here, which can make for better subdivision. So for example, if I apply crease set here, you notice how, first of all, these edges are not selected here. So you have to go in here and select them as well. If you don't select them, let's say I apply creasing and then open subdiv. Notice how we get this bad result right here. So we actually have to go in here and select these edges as well. And then I can either add if I have just those 4 or update if I have all of them. So now we kind of solve that problem. But with this, notice how those edges are not selected here because I don't have those edges. And we don't get that kind of issue here. Because with this topology right here, the polygons want to subdivide and curve right here. They want to follow each other and curve right here. But with this topology, we avoid that kind of behavior here. So just something to keep in mind as you're modeling various things here. Sometimes it's a good idea to just subdivide, give yourself lots of detail here, and you can avoid doing things like insetting here. Here I can select these edges. Then go into loops, loop tools, and then use center. Because with this topology, we get a little bit of distorted subdivision here. It's not perfectly even here. So I can use center to center it out right here. So once again, I can add a basic detail here. What I can do is quickly select all of this and then just press center multiple times to straighten all this out here. And for example here, all I can do is just kind of move this up right here, and I already get an interesting detail there. And perhaps also just move this back as well here. So for example, I can select this, inset, then select these vertices or edges, kind of scale this like so. Straight here. Now if I just move it to the left, you notice how it no longer matches up here, so I can actually move it to the left using edge constraints. And notice how it now follows right here. And here I can, let's say, bevel. In this situation, for example, I can just remove this. And now I have this kind of detail right here. If I want to create another detail right here, I can select this, play it on the y-axis, select this, also make it planar. Maybe scale this a little bit. And now I've got this kind of detail right here. Set flow, and there we go. Now, of course, this is before creasing this. Normally, I would do all the modeling here, then apply crease set, but here I'll just show you real quick what kind of creases you would set up here. So let's say like this. All right, and then I'll just give this, let's say, 0.25. And now I get this kind of detail right here. So here what I can do is select these vertices, connect, and now I've got this extra edge selected here. And so now we've got this kind of detail. So just very quick changing of details just by connecting vertices, inserting a few loops here, and just kind of doing very basic but effective additional detail modeling here. So you can see here, you can just keep zooming in here, subdividing, adding detail, subdividing, adding further and further detail. Let's go even further here. So right now, I've just kind of selected this. It was kind of in this position here, and all I did was just move it up and then back here. What I can also do is cut right here, and then straighten this out, and now we've got this kind of detail here. And what I can do is snaps, press S, Alt D for axis constraints, make sure the y-axis is active, and then I can snap right here to make it even. So you can see how you can get a lot of interesting details just by doing very basic operations here. That's one very important thing to keep in mind here. So you can get some very interesting details just by doing some long cut operations here. So for example, if I cut right here and then cut all the way over here, we do have some bad topology here. We can fix that up later. But as you're designing here, you want to go very quickly here, focus first on the design, and then fix up the topology later. So with these polygons selected, notice how I selected the left side just by applying symmetry. So I had this selection. And then sometimes when you're doing some operation like scale, for example, you want there to be an even amount of, you want the left to match the right here, because if I, for example, bevel this and then scale, notice how it's going to scale on the inside right here, using this as the center point as opposed to the center of the object here. So now if I apply symmetry, I'll get this kind of result here, and this kind of topology here. Whereas what I could do is have this selected, apply symmetry, edit poly, it's going to remember the selection right here, and now if I bevel and scale, it's going to scale on the inside, and now if I apply symmetry, I won't get that bad topology or bad result right here. So after we've done designing, then I can go in here and just use target world to clean up the bad topology here. you still get some triangles here. If you want to get rid of these triangles, here's what you do. You simply just cut right here and then connect and then remove the edges, and now we have 3 quads instead. So once again, triangle, quad, triangle. Simply cut, 1, 2, connect, remove. There we go. Here, for example, we have a triangle also. To get rid of that, we can simply cut, let's say, from here to, let's say, right there. Remove these edges. And then I can select this right here, let's say face or edge constraints, and then now we have quads here as well. Notice how we get this kind of effect right here. This is a result of having 2 vertices too close together, which is why I can use weld right here. Alright, and then you can select this and then crease set. Or in this case, I'll just use crease right here. And so you could get these kinds of interesting details using this technique here. Flip the polygons here. In order to close this up, I'll make sure I'm editable poly, and then I'll select this. I can, in this case, use either border level, rapid tools, topology, rapid quad cap, or I can select these vertices, which will hold a better idea in many situations. There we go. The reason for this is because we have this edge in the middle, which will complicate things. So if I didn't have this edge here, all I had to do is just select this, deselect this, and bridge with no problem. But if you have multiple edges here, if I just use this technique, let's say just select this, deselect this, and bridge, we get the problem of having no loops going through here. So we'll have to once again go in here and select loops, and then of course target weld them together, or just regular weld. But using this script right here, we'll soon get all that done for us right here. And we can get quick paneling detail just by selecting edges here and then extruding. And then for the corners here, I will just target weld, edge constraints, and just kind of fix that up right there. A quick way to get these kinds of panel lines. I can also just get some extra detail here by insetting, regularize. So the regularizer is great for getting interesting details here. Just going to be more organic here. For example, just select all of these polygons here and just use regularizer. We just kind of strange result. I can try using, let's say, face constraints, and I can simply rotate this around here and then use regularizer again. So in this case, I will just delete this and I will collapse it and once again use that script. And there we go. Rapid tools, topology, rapid quad cap gives us a good result right here. So just because regularize doesn't give a good result right away doesn't mean it's not useful here. Because now we've got this kind of circular detail here. And what I can do, for example, is scale it to get this more oval detail here. So in this case, I'm scaling like so. I can only scale on the, let's say, y-axis here, x-axis. What if I want to scale diagonally, let's say right here? What I can do is switch the scale tool from view to, let's say, screen. And now notice how the gizmo has changed right here, and I can now scale like so. So once again here, instead of using bevel, I will just bevel down. I won't use outline, I'll just scale here.